hope you're enjoying the short week. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Welcome to the Court of Public Opinion. Pete's behind the camera, and I'm glad you are wherever you are in the world. And if you're listening to us as a podcast, I don't know where you might be, but thank you for finding us. I believe you can sort of have us as a favourite or subscribe or do something like that, which means that every day, because we post the Court of Public Opinion every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. I think it's, when do you post it? It's sort of, Pete?
Well,
at 9 o'clock.
It's scheduled for 9 o'clock.
But somewhere in the world it could be 4 o'clock in the afternoon. God knows. It's a brave new world, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I hope you had a pleasant Anzac Day. Pete reminds me, and I should have mentioned it yesterday, that while we're talking about the fighting men and women of Australia and the sacrifices they made for the things we enjoy today, like freedom of speech and thought, spare a thought for the horses in the First World War. And for that matter, all the wars that have been for centuries. The pain and suffering, and they had no choice. The pain and suffering of horses, fighting horses, cavalry horses. Probably the most moving movie I've ever seen as a war movie, and I cried like a baby, but I sort of do that regularly, was War Horse. Do you see that, Pete?
Oh God, yeah, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Oh, it was the most horrific, moving example of why people shouldn't really go to war. Well, the civilians suffer, of course, soldiers suffer, and the horses suffer. I think it was a movie, clearly it was a movie, but they had it as a stage show too, which was the most incredibly presented piece of theatre I've ever seen. War Horse. I'm sure it's probably around. Before we get into the stuff of the day, a couple of things. I mentioned to you that, while I was with AA before they sacked me, one of the people I remember talking to as a great privilege was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I remember mentioning to you the other day that he had announced, or his people had announced, that he was running for president of the United States next year. And this arrived in the mail. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., American Values, and he very kindly, and he's not lobbying me, and he's not, I cannot help his campaign in any way, but he sent me this, an autographed copy, to Jeremy with admiration and affection, Bobby Kennedy Jr. Well, Bobby, sincerely, I wish you well. I wish you well. Your family's given a great deal for the United States of America. Be interesting. It's going to be it's always an incredible show, a presidential election. Greatest show on earth, probably. Before we get into the stuff of the day, yes, April 26th. Lucille Ball, American comedian, actress, but more than that, Lucille Ball was a fantastic businesswoman. She was the power behind Desilu. Anyway, she died of a heart attack at just 77 years old. But a great entertainer and personality. 1989 was the year that she died. Argentina surrenders to Great Britain on South Georgia Island, end of the Falklands War, 1982. Why the hell did they do that? Amazing. Muhammad, founder of Islam. Well, according to the Shia sect, today was his birthday, or is his birthday. 570 was the year. 570. Some people give the source of the date to April 20, not April 26. observed according to Islamic lunar calendar. He died in 632, but most say born this day in 570. He must have had an incredibly persuasive personality. You know, Ramadan, where people don't eat, they starve, they fast from sunrise to sunset, and people observe it. I mean, I don't know what it is about other religions. They are far less demanding, yet people don't seem to be able to, if you'll pardon the expression, give a damn. But Islam seems to have a tighter rein on its devotees than most others. 1982, Rod Stewart is mugged. A gunman steals his $50,000 Porsche from Hollywood Boulevard, Los Angeles, California. 1982. John Wilkes Booth, American stage actor and assassin of US President Abraham Lincoln, shot and killed on this day in 1865. He was shot by a 26-year-old Union soldier by the name of Boston Corbett. It's a fascinating story that when he shot the president didn't die for a couple of days. But he, Wilkes Booth, jumped from the presidential box onto the stage and broke his leg. And he got out of the theatre and ran, well, best he could. He found his way to a doctor's home, because up until recently a doctor would always have a red light outside his house to let people know that he was a doctor. Anyway, he got into the doctor's, banged on the door, got into the doctor's house. The doctor didn't know that this man had just killed the president of the United States of America, or at that time tried to. And amazingly, he treated the man, did the best he could for him. That doctor's name was Mudd, Dr. Mudd, which is where that expression comes from. You know the expression, his name is Mudd. And that poor man was hounded till the day he died for doing what doctors should do, according to the Hippocratic Oath. You help people. Strange story, that. Anyway, moving on. Carol Burnett, American comedian, Carol Burnett Show, actress. She was born in San Antonio, Texas in 1933. Melania Trump, American-born wife of former President Donald Trump, First Lady of the United States, 2017 to 2021, born in Yugoslavia, this day in 1970. God, I've got ties older than that. Not that I wear them. Sid James, his real name is Solomon Joel Cohen, born in South Africa, British character actor, comedian, Hancock's Half Hour, Carry On movies. He dies of a heart attack at the age of 62. Sid James. I think he was on the buses, wasn't he? Oh no, maybe that was somebody else.
I don't think so.
Not on the buses.
Bless this house.
Bless This House? Yeah. 1976 he died. Rudolf Hess, the German Nazi official, Deputy Führer, in fact, dramatically escapes to Britain on this day in 1941. Born in Egypt in 1894. Copernicus makes his first observation of Saturn in 1514, and he is so angry when people call him Copernicus. Hates it with a passion. And one more. 1986 actor and bodybuilder Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was 39. He weds American journalist and newscaster Maria Shriver. She was 30. They divorced in 2011, but married on this day in 1986. And if you remember the day for any reason at all, Oh, comedian Bill Cosby's found guilty of sexual assault, 2018. Oh, that could be a historical moment to remember. 1 year ago, today, exactly 1 year, the World Bank warns the war in Ukraine will cause the largest commodity shock since the 1970s, with large economic and humanitarian effects. Lead up to the budget, which is looming, all the usual kite flying, which is all about how and where they'll be spending our money. First, let me say that I sympathise with the Treasurer. You'll never be able to please everybody. And you can imagine all of the lobbying and pressure and begging that goes on in the background and the back rooms. You can have all the window dressing and inquiries and committees and fact-finding excursions that you like. There are only so many taxpayers, so many workers putting in. It doesn't matter how much juggling you do, you've got a finite amount of money, which is why a government has to prioritise its expenditure. Understand that waste and fraud, as in the NDIS, has got to be stamped out. Got to be. Stop the billions that are spent on consultants when you have a bloated and expensive public service already there. If they can't do the job, well, get rid of them. I mean, keep the public service or keep the consultants, but don't do both. Government advertising is another waste. And of course, stop encouraging people like hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders welcomed onto welfare. I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious. And that point I made to you yesterday, heads of government departments and statutory authorities and bodies paid millions. And my friend Tony Denton, who said it should be a rule of thumb, no head of any department gets paid more than the head of government, which is the Prime Minister, which I think is about $500,000. That would be a very fair salary for anybody. Australia needs investment. Taxed too heavily because of all these demands. And the Woodsides of this world, which we were talking about last week, they'll go somewhere else. Capital is mobile. Governments should not tax energy and enterprise. That's what a nation is built on and with. Taxation, however, can be a very useful tool to achieve a desired outcome. And outcomes are what we should be interested in. I said it's stupid to tax energy and enterprise. That's income and company tax. What you do tax, though, sensibly, I think, is consumption, as in the GST, which is a huge lever if you want to control inflation. The big bogeyman at the moment everywhere in the world. We, of course, won't get any of this common sense when the budget is handed down. We will get a highly political document from a politician, Treasurer Dr. Jim Chalmers, who doesn't, by the way, have a degree in economics. He has a degree in politics. And as I said, to sort of kind of add injury or insult to injury, that doctorate that he has was done on Paul Keating. Can you imagine a doctor of Paul Keating running the economy? What I like about the GST, or a consumption tax generally, is you don't have to pay it. You choose. The more you spend, the more tax you pay. And you can avoid tax by not spending, which is how you pull down inflation. What could be more fair or constructive? Now, here's a question. What should be the age of criminal responsibility? What do you think, Pete?
8.
8. Well, they're arguing 8, 10 or 12. There's a big push on at the moment to lift the age to 12. And I know that here in South Australia, and probably why Pete said that, we've got kids as young as 8 stealing cars, running wild, vandalising private property, probably on drugs, I don't know. 8 years old? God help us. 8 years old. Sure, there are other things at work here, not just age. Clearly, we have to do something, but something that will help, something that will fix the problem. Because, as I'm fond of saying, as the twig is bent, so shall grow the tree. These children have to be, I think, rescued, and not only from the gangs and bad influences, but sometimes their own families. Now, in some cases, we're looking at second and third generation dysfunctional families. Things that have gone on in the past clearly haven't worked. A lot of people meant well, but sorry, didn't work. We don't have to go back to Dickensian days, but we do have to go back to discipline, parental respect, support, in fact, for parents to do their jobs. Teachers must be given the right to discipline kids and teach them. These kids do not respect the system. They do not respect the world in which they have to function and succeed. And it's all been caused by the trendies and the so-called do-gooders and the social libertarians. I think John Laws used to call them snivel libertarians. I don't know that I'd go that far. You see, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and these people do mean well, but they never apologise for their faulty philosophies. Now, it would have to be, of course, the ABC who carried this story. The Central Land Council, very influential group of people, condemns the divisive politics of Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Jacinta Price. Almost predictable, I would say. The Central Land Council says that Senator Price's divisive approach to the voice is hurting Indigenous Australia. Now, of course, at that point, the ABC interviewer could have said, well, I'm sorry, sir, could you explain how? But no. I don't think this voice thing is going to do anything for Aboriginal people. I think it is racist, and I think it is divisive. How is Senator Price's comments hurting Indigenous Australia? Please explain. I don't get it. Now, the opposition has been demanding to see the legal advice that was given to the government by the Solicitor General as to the voice. You know, I mean, what the voice really means, what it's going to be saying, what are the consequences, what are the implications. It seems that he thinks it's quite benign, quite okay. Well, I don't know, I don't. And a significant number of Australians don't think so either, along with Jacinta Price, obviously. We think it's a Trojan horse. And according to those Freedom of Information documents that I talked to you about, I think on Monday, the consequences of a yes vote are horrific and will change the country forever. And not only not for the better, but in a negative way for everybody. And if you have any doubt, listen to this. 3% of the population, in truth, has no business changing this country. Number one, they don't have the authority, moral or numeric. And number two, they can't put on the table one single definitive benefit. I think it's true. I don't know that I always respect politicians, but I certainly respect the office of the politician. The office is the thing we must respect. But let me say this, I saw Ed Cusack, Federal Minister in the Labor government, and I have to tell you I respect him for what he said on Channel 9 News the other night. He stated categorically that the government will stick by its promise to honour the third-tier tax cuts as legislated by the previous government, scheduled to come in next year. Now, let me say here that I'm not affected by it one way or the other. I've got no axe to grind. But I am interested in politicians honouring their word. And according to that Channel 9 story, Ed Cusack and the Labor Party, and therefore the Labor government, will honour its word. And I respect them for that. I was talking to a friend the other day, a remarkable story, not earth-shattering, mind you, but worth putting in the court of public opinion. She was telling me about a recent trip to the doctor. Her regular doctor wasn't there. She had to use another doctor and fill out another patient record form. Memorable on the form was the question, gender at birth. Gender at birth, well, that's easy, right? Then the next question was the gender that you now identify as. Are these people serious? You've got to put down your gender, male or female. Then, of course, you've somehow along the trip of life had the opportunity to change your mind? Really? I remind you that according to the last census, 1,260 people, that is the total number of people in the last census who stated that they were transgender. Are we turning the world upside down for 1,260 people? And how many of that 1,260 people would, in fact, want any part of this nonsense? I don't know. Perhaps you do, and perhaps you'll communicate it with me. A terrible tragedy I saw the other night when a cyclist was knocked off his bicycle, killed, in fact, sadly, by a motorist who arguably should not have had a driver's licence. Blind in one eye because of an earlier stroke. Now I suspect we are going to see a kind of a witch hunt pursuing elderly people who have perhaps the most minor problem, when in actual fact the number of these sort of tragic incidents are minuscule compared to the hooning and the reckless driving of people aged between the ages of 18 and 25. Now, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be ageist, but the truth is that most older drivers who are not affected by ill health or impairment of some kind or another, they are very experienced and good behind the wheel of a car. In fact, I would argue much safer than the kids. I'm sorry, I think that's the truth. You might not agree with me, but I'm very happy to welcome your comments on the subject. No warning about this, and it's the first time I've seen this story. Do you know what an isolator is? Pete, do you know what an isolator is?
Never heard of it. No.
An isolator. An isolator.
I'm just looking it up now with fear and trepidation.
Okay. It depends on whether you've got one on the roof. An isolator is something you have up there on your solar collection system on the roof. All over the country, I'm told, we are in danger of these things exploding. We're talking so far this year 60 fires caused by them. Panels installed before 2019, I think, if I remember the story correctly, are going to have to be looked at because they represent a clear and present danger for anyone who has rooftop solar electricity collectors. This whole pursuit of solar energy and all the rest is admirable, but it also tends to be rather fraught. Let me answer Doug's note here to me, because I get behind with my correspondence. Doug says, if this voice gets up, I have no doubt the Aboriginals will want a treaty. Yes, I think that's true. Doug says he fears that it'll be cancellation of Australia Day, removal of the Australian flag. They will want every Australian. Well, this, Doug, what you're saying here is what Jacinta Price has said. They'll want every Australian to pay rent on property we own, while at the same time owning 51.3% of the entire country themselves as of today, and pay nothing for it. And Anzac Day yesterday. Interesting, Doug points out that what the Imperial Japanese Army couldn't do in 1943, 500,000 Aboriginal people, 3% of the population, will do. That is, take over the country. Hand in glove, Doug suggests, with the Greens and the Labour Party. Are we seriously going to let them do that? I mean, it might be a little bit over the top, Doug, but I can understand where you're coming from. I don't know where we're going with it all. It really does depend, I think, on that referendum and common sense. I heard David Pocock, speaking of things electrical, David Pocock, the independent senator for the ACT, demanding that the government brings Australia into line with Europe's move to electric vehicles. I don't think he's across some of these dangers and stories, negative stories either. Random uncontrolled battery fires, lithium-ion batteries, batteries that don't work in very cold weather, technology with many design flaws. For example, one I was telling you about the other day, if your battery goes flat, the doors don't open, nothing works. You can't open the recharging port. And resale value, people don't want to buy second-hand electric cars. Europe is moving, but I would suggest not in the direction the Senator is indicating. As far as I can see, looking at the Senator's CV, he's never had a job. Now look, I could be wrong, but all I can gather is that he played football for a living. And I don't know how much of an authority he is on electric cars or electric technology, but I suppose in a strange sense it's a tribute to our democratic system. Or maybe it's an indictment of it. He certainly has sway and power, as senators in the parliament do. How much common sense? I don't know. Oh, by the way, do you remember when we were self-sufficient? Pete?
Yes.
Tony, do you remember?
We made things, yes.
We made things. And you know, we had oil refineries, plenty of oil, petroleum. Now we apparently have less than 2 months in reserve. 2 months. 2 months. All I can say is wake up, Australia. One hiccup in global circumstances, if you get another pandemic or a war or a rumour of war or a ship that jams up the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, supply chains fail, nothing works. Please, let's not allow our country to become dependent upon others, particularly when others are not really dependable. I think it's absolutely stupid, almost treason. We should have a government that demands, as a fundamental goal, self-sufficiency. Have I got time to mention the war in Sudan? The war in Sudan, terrible. One of many, of course, in Africa. I've lost track of how many coups they've had in that country. But it's not just Sudan. It's all of them. Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda. It's just total instability. Now in Sudan, when the military threw out the elected government, as they do regularly, the elected president went along with them, the army found that it was divided in two. Two sides fighting against each other, the same army. And who suffers the pain? The people, of course. African countries. Perfect example of why you don't want to go down a Republican track. If you look at Africa, or indeed South America, any part of those parts of the world, you know, almost country by country, dysfunctional, violent, reliant upon international foreign aid to survive. I would just like to, I was going to say let them stew in their own juice, but you can't do it. But then again, how do you interfere? And you can't just go on forcing aid into those countries, because you know that apart from being violent and revolutionary, they're also corrupt. Have a great day. Thank you very much for viewing the Court of Public Opinion. Pete and I will be back tomorrow. Believe in yourself. Thank you for viewing, and goodbye for now.